ReefBum is sponsored by Champion Lighting and Supply, Polo Reef, and Fauna Marin.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. So over the years I've experimented a lot with different products, different pieces of equipment on my reef tanks, and not everything has worked out. Some of the products have made it into the garbage, some of the equipment has made it into my reef keeping boneyard. So I came up with a list of things that just didn't pan out for me. This is the list right here that I wanted to go over. And you know, hey, these are just my experiences. I know a lot of you folks out there have had success with this stuff, what I'm going to rattle off, but just for some reason didn't work out for me. So with that, let's get started. All right, number one on my list is macroalgae. Man, and this thing has been a bugaboo for me for a long time. I think the first thing I tried with macroalgae was a macroalgae reactor, the Pax Bellum. And I just, you know, I tried it for a long time, a couple of years probably. And all these experiments, let me just preface by saying that I've tried these experiments for many months. But the algae reactor I used for a long time, and I just had a really tough time keeping the chaeto alive for longer periods of time. And, you know, so I know it's something that people have had, you know, success with, algae reactors, but for me it just didn't work out. It could have been trace element dosing that I just wasn't dialed in correctly. So then I moved on to refugiums. I tried a bucket refugium. I tried a standard refugium in one of my sumps. Just got a little bit too messy. Again, I used a chaeto. It was crashing on me every now and then. So I tried that for a long while. And both the algae reactor and the refugium were great in terms of helping control nutrients, because that's really what I was doing, was I wanted to help control nutrients with the macroalgae. So those didn't really pan out over time. And then finally I tried an algae scrubber. And I think an algae scrubber was my favorite method in terms of using macro to control nutrients. It was a remote piece of equipment similar to the algae reactor, but with the scrubber, it's just basically you're growing whatever grows on that screen with the LEDs shining on it. So I thought that was a very cool, simplistic method. The stuff never really crashed on me, but I think with the algae reactor, it was almost too powerful, and I removed too many nutrients. So you know, recently I ditched the scrubber. And I'm just really trying to rely on my corals being the main source of nutrient export. ChemiClean, and it worked. The one or two times that I tried it, it worked. It got rid of the cyano, but the cyano came back because I just didn't find the root cause of the problem. And other things happened. I can't recall exactly what happened, but it might have been dinoflagellates that happened after I tried the ChemiClean. You know, got rid of the cyano, but then it was like opening the door for the dinos, which was not good. Do know that it does impact the microbiome on a reef tank. Just not good to use chemicals like that. So it's just something that I really do try to avoid unless it's a big problem in the tank. So it just it worked, but then it didn't work. Amino acids is another thing that just never worked out for me. I tried dosing those a long time ago with the hopes of improving coral coloration, and the only thing that happened was I got a lot of cyano, so I just stopped dosing the amino acids. Live phytoplankton is another thing that I did for a long time. I cultured my own live phyto, and I definitely saw an increase in my pod population, but I didn't really see any, you know, I didn't observe any improvements with my corals during that time that I was using the live phyto, and it was a lot of work. You know, I'd spent a lot of time each week culturing the live phyto, growing it, you know, and then reseeding the cultures. So it was a lot of work, and I just didn't see the return on the investment with the live phyto. GFO, years ago I was using GFO, and it was kind of a love-hate relationship. It was great to reduce phosphates in my reef tanks. It just worked really effectively. The problem was though that if you use too much GFO, too aggressive with it, it could really cause some loss in colors in the SPS, which did happen to me a couple of times. I didn't like that. It's also not gonna, it's not only gonna bind phosphates, but it's also gonna bind valuable trace elements. So that's when I ditched the GFO and I tried to go with the macroalgae. But again, as I talked about before, just leaning on my corals as the main nutrient export in my system. But that only works if you have a lot of corals, and fortunately I do. Another failed experiment for me was the use of dry rock, and it was a problem because I just used dry rock only to start a reef tank. And looking back, I really should have seeded the tank with some live rock rubble or some actual live rock itself, like 5, 10, 20 pounds, whatever, of live rock in the sump. I'm using a cryptic sump right now, which has been great on one of my systems. It's allowed me to add a whole ton of rock, which has got a lot of different surfaces for bacteria and microfauna to really thrive on. So yeah, the dry rock experiment just did not work out. And I also have started a, my 187 gallon tank has actually the Carib Sea life rock on it. And I tried curing that for a long time in a Rubbermaid, 100-gallon Rubbermaid tub by adding established tank water, dosing some bacteria, really trying to get life going on that dry rock. And man, I've just had one problem after another with that Carib Sea life rock. Again, if anybody's had similar experiences, I would love to hear about it in the comments. If you've had great experience, mention that. But I've had a lot of bubble algae. I've had some of this green mat algae. I've had Bryopsis, cyano. It just seems to be a magnet for bad algae. So I just haven't had the best experience with the dry rock. But I'm a realist, and I know that there's not a lot of options out there for tanks for live rock. But I did start this tank behind me with the KP Aquatics live rock, and man, this tank hit the ground running and grew SPS like crazy. Another piece of equipment that I've stopped using are Gyre pumps, and I love the Gyre pumps in terms of their low profile because they work great in frag tanks. You could put them underneath frag racks so they can blast detritus from the bottom, which is great. It helps prevent the algae from accumulating in a frag tank. But man, I always had issues trying to clean those things, pull them, taking them apart. There's a lot of different parts, putting them back together. The pump would work for a while, then it would stop working. So that was frustrating to me, and I just turned to the Ecotech MP40s and MP60s, good pumping power, easy to clean. Kalkwasser stirrers, reactors, whatever you want to call them, that's another piece of equipment that I've stopped using. They're great because they, have a small footprint. So you run the RODI water, your auto top off through one of those reactors or stirrers, and they certainly can help, with the Kalkwasser dosing. The problem is the constant influx of the RODI water will dilute that supersaturated Kalkwasser solution. So I've turned to the Chris Meckley method in terms of using stationary drums and just adding Kalkwasser, then adding RODI water and having a lid, not sealed airtight, but a lid on top of that, and then using a dosing pump to dose that Kalkwasser solution to my tanks. And that's super potent in terms of the what's coming out of there. And I find my pH is much higher versus when I was using stirrers. So yeah, that's been a big revelation for me. Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, I would love to hear your comments. So drop them below the video description in terms of whether or not you've had some similar experiences or different experiences. That's going to do it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Until next time, be safe and be well. Later.